coverage. And I said, the 1952, 1956 pole vault gold medalist, yes, he was there in the mission field. I was awed, and I'm telling you, after that, the pole vault was everything. I just thought, he made it look so easy. I found it very difficult to do. I found I didn't have enough upper body strength. Yeah, I could high jump and I could long jump, but the pole vault, it takes an extra few muscles in the upper body that I didn't seem to have. So I thought, well, okay, I'll leave the pole vault for a while, but began officiating it. And then it was interesting in those days because I remember 1962 Birchmont Stadium in Toronto, Alf Groom from PEI winning the pole vault into a dirt pit. All of a sudden, the pole vault world changed. These huge pits were developed. They came from nowhere. If you think back to about 1968 Mexico Olympics, the high jump featured the big pits. Somewhere in between 62 and 68, these pits came out and the poles changed. All of a sudden now we got fiberglass poles, athletes completely jumping a different technique. The poles were fascinating. I became a coach after my career was over. And as a coach, I had the opportunity to coach or Bruce Simpson, who was a Canadian Olympian. He was 72 Olympics. He was fifth in the pole vault, and he was going to Ottawa U. So he joined my group of pole vaulters. So it gave me another look at the pole vault as a coach, and I was amazed at how hard Bruce worked. He knew his competitors weren't taking days off. He wouldn't take a day off. He was going to Ottawa U, taking law. He would come to practice. He would be mentally, physically beat, exhausted, but yet he would push himself to try to, get better. 76 Olympics, when they came along, I was invited in 74 to join the Olympic officiating team. I called myself a backdoor Olympian because I didn't make it as an athlete, but I got there another way. And I was very proud to be there as an official. And of course, I wore two hats there because Bruce was jumping and I was officiating at it. The night of the pole vault was interesting because I was assigned to officiate the qualifying round and Bruce was jumping in it. And I thought, oh gosh, I think I got a conflict of interest here. Some people knew that I coached Bruce, and of course, I would never help him during the competition because I'm like you. We do it the right way in Canada. Anyway, I withdrew myself as a coach, as an official. So I sat as a coach and watched him jump, and it was a very bitter night for him. He did not jump well. His practice had not been going well. It is the Olympic Games. It comes around every 4 years, and if you're not ready for it sort of passed you by. We found out after that he had a stress fracture in his foot, and that was part of the reason why he wasn't comfortable when he was taken off. But it gave me another look at the pole vault, and I watched Roberts from the United States. He was the best pole vaulter in the world going into the 76 Olympics, and it was pouring rain. How many of you done pole vaults when it's pouring rain? It always seems to rain during the pole vault. And he was passing and passing and passing to wait for the rain to stop. He was smart enough to take a jump at a lower height, and then he passed and passed. But he actually finished silver medal in the Olympics. But because of the rain, he was sort of caught in what strategy to use. But I got a great love affair of the pole vault. I was so lucky. You don't know what time period you're going to be born in. Like I was born in the 40s, way back in 1941, and I lived through the 50s. Rock and roll, music, culture was different, society was different. Some of you were there nodding your heads. I think Tim remembers those days, I know. But anyway, what happened was we were so active in track and field in Canada. We had many good meet directors, and Canada was very aggressive bidding for games. So we got the Olympics in 76. We had the trials the night, like the Olympic trials in 75. We had the World Student Games. The Francophone Games came to Canada. The Pan Am Games came to Canada twice in that time period. The World Juniors, the World Pan Ams, the Pan Am Juniors came. There were so many meets coming to Canada. You didn't have to leave Canada to be exposed or get a chance to officiate with the best athletes in the world. So it was the right time to be a track and field official. And I can remember, I don't know how it happened, but I became a referee a lot faster than what's happening today. It's one of the gripes I have. It always takes so long for us to work up to be a referee. And by the time you get to be a referee, you're old. But I was a referee at a young age, and I can remember at the Olympics and also in the World Student Games, some of the referees looking at me, and they were getting old. Adam Neisner and some of these officials, they were saying, "Hey, it's up to you, you know, because you're a young guy, you'll be around for a while." And I was lucky enough to be able to do that, and to be able to be a vertical jumps or horizontal jumps, or sometimes a jumps referee at many of these international track meets. And that gave me the wonderful opportunity to work with the world's best pole vaulters. They were coming to Canada on a regular basis. So you got to see them. You even got to know some of them. Thierry Vigneron from France was one of my favorite pole vaulters because he was always playing games with me. The games like, oh, he'd come out of the pit and he'd miss the bar and he would say, "Win, win, win." And I'd say, "No, win, you hit it." He'd say, "No, no, win, win, win." I said, "No, you hit it." And then he'd look at me and say, "Well, good try, eh?" And so you got to know some of these guys. So the experiences were wonderful experiences. Also blessed to be in Ontario, where we have OFSA. OFSA meets are unbelievable. It's such a large track meet. I mean, it outnumbers some of the other meets you do because we have so many students in Ontario, and these OFSA championships are wonderful experiences. Many of you out there have worked at OFSA with me. What really happened in pole vault was so wonderful when we went from the old pits to the new pits, and getting used to training an athlete to jump. If you're a golfer, you probably know something about flex and shafts and stuff like that. Because as a golfer, you might have a stiff shaft in your golf club, or a medium shaft, or a light senior shaft, and they work as you swing to hit the ball. Poles are like that. The poles where you're allowed 16 feet long, and the poles all have different flex numbers on them. So you might have different poles for jumping into the wind, jumping with the wind at your back. Different poles suit certain different conditions. And if you notice, in the old days, a pole vaulter came with one pole. Today, when they come, they got an arsenal of poles. And it's to figure out, who has what pole, which pole belonged to somebody. John Caulfield will probably remember this because he was a technical manager at the Pan Ams in Toronto. When the poles were delivered from the airport, they're put in a room at the stadium. And when I went in there, I don't know how many poles there were, but they're all together. Who owns what poles? I had to have a special meeting of all the pole vaulters come down and meet me and sort them out. If you think in the old days, only men pole vaulted and decathlon, but there weren't many decathlons. So now the decathlon meets included a lot of meets. So when you look at the poles, you got the regular men's pole vaulters, you got the women's pole vault, you got the decathlon pole vault. So you have to sort them out, because the last thing you want is the pole vaulters going in at a big meet like that to get their poles and bring them out. You like them to be delivered to the site, so you need them sorted out. Most minor meets we do, of course, the poles are in a room, and we say, "Go get your poles and bring them out," and then warm up. I hope we're checking poles when the poles come out on the site. As when you're running an event, you ask the vaulter what pole you're using, and you check the pole, just an on-site inspection. Because in the old days, and Eric will remember this because he was part of this, at the World Student Games, we had to go into a room where all the poles were, pull every pole out of every tube. I think the French must have had, I don't know, 10, 12 poles. The Americans have a pile. And we had to take the tape off them if they were taped illegally. The next day when the poles were out on the site, people were saying, "What happened to my pole? Somebody messed with my pole." And I said, "Well, it was us." And they would have to retape their pole correctly. So many things have changed from the simple days of doing the pole vault to now it's very complex. Setting up the pit. I see Win here. I think Win is one of the best setup mans I've ever seen. He's waving at us there, but he comes out with his special little tools and puts them on, levels the standards, make sure everything's set up. And it's so wonderful to see officials, and we're good at this across Canada. I've had the luxury of traveling from west to east and working with officials from coast to coast, and we're good. We really are good. As a country, we're good. And everybody has maybe their own way of doing it, but the basic thing is it gets done. The standards get set up properly and everything is a go. And it's up to us as officials to make sure that when the athletes come out, everything is ready for them. We shouldn't be messing around with stuff when they're coming on site. As an ex-athlete, I've had the chance to go through Champ de Pelles, and be brought out on site. And if you take a look at the big meets, I'm talking big meets now, where there's maybe an international field or a Canadian championship, the athletes go through a system where they go up and they have to warm up. Basically, it's on a field. There's no pole vault setup up there other than, say, Olympic Games where they can practice. So they come down to get checked in. They're sitting in there. Then they get checked in. They haven't touched a pole. Then they come back out, say, to the site. We bring them out to the site. And if their poles are delivered, then they get a chance on site. So we get a chance to warm them up. And when we warm them up, what I've watched across Canada is we have different ways of warming them up. I always like it when an official helps somebody warm up, that we get their mark, show them where their mark is to speed things along, and also good PR with the pole vaulters. But to get them warmed up efficiently in the time limit they have, the schedulers take a lot of time figuring this out. How much time do we need on the pole vault runway to allow the athletes to have maybe 2 jumps? Wonderfully, the bungee cord's been invented. Best thing I've seen since sliced bread, to have not to put a pole up, to be able to use a bungee cord across, because now you can move standards up and down without things falling down all the time. Wonderful, wonderful invention. When I look at the other inventions that have gone along with pole vault, measuring devices that make things for us easier. Eric can remember this because in Edmonton in '83 at the World Student Games, before the games actually opened, they had an all-comers meet on a Wednesday night or something like that. And I was concerned about this, and they told me, oh, no, worry. It'll just be the local people, local kids and stuff. Yeah, really. The French team had arrived and the Soviet team was there. So here we had, I think, I counted them up, there were 4 ex-world record holders in a twilight meet. And the standards, we had the team there that was going to do the actual meet. So at least we had a team there to get the experience. And that night, the winner was Volko, the Russian. And he said to me, he says, it's a nice night. He says, I think I go for world record tonight. Oh, yeah, okay. He won the bar at 5 meters 92. There was no problem getting the bar up to 5 meters 92. The problem was measuring it. No periscope, no calibration bars of any kind. The best they had was a 16-foot ladder. So we had to flip the front part of the pit back, put the ladder in place. I'm on top of a 16-foot ladder with a tape measuring 5 meters 92. If I'm going to fall, I'm going that way for sure into the pit. Anyway, he misses it. I try again. Okay, same thing. Measured again. And I said, try one more time. So he missed it a 3rd time. He didn't set any record, but he was trying to tie the world record. It was at that point that I panicked. I said, we got to get something here we can measure with, because these guys are going to jump that high. So they put a call out to Sherbrooke, and Sherbrooke sent up a periscope. And so if the team can remember, the ones that were there, Evelyn Esdale was the chief. We were going around measuring the height of the bars in all of the stadium to get used to the periscope. And it, of course, made measuring easier. I don't know if any of you have ever used a periscope, but I have fond memories of the one we had in Ottawa when we used to have those wonderful indoor track meets in Ottawa. During the 80s, Pat Reed was here. We had track meets indoors, and I think Hamilton had one or Toronto had one. And we would get pole vaulters to come in from around the world, and you'd have these wonderful indoor, so exciting track meets. And the pole vault in Ottawa, I had a periscope that I'd used for years. The problem was the vaulters were jumping higher than the periscope would go. And so I asked the city of Ottawa to put a meter extension on the periscope, which they did. They welded it on. That was great, except the peephole, instead of being here, was now up there. So I had to get a box or a ladder to stand on to look in the peephole. So all these things were kind of funny. And somehow that periscope got broken. So I had no periscope to measure with. So the city of Ottawa came up with a nice, wonderful solution. They got me a forklift with a bucket on the end of it. So I mean, isn't pole vault fishing wonderful? How many times you get to ride in a forklift up and down, eh? So here I am with this forklift, and they brought it out. They're very proud of it. I'm officiating in a tuxedo, those indoor meets for class. And I said, well, I only one question. How do I get into that box? There was no gate. So I had to crawl over the top, which wasn't too elegant. So they took out a piece on the side so I could get in, and I'd go riding up and down the periscope. And it was really funny. At one time, the guy that was operating the forklift, this guy was union. It was his, downtime. It was recess for him, like it was for me as a teacher. He was not working at the time, and we needed him. So I went to find him, and he was having a cigarette. And I said, "Would you please come operate the forklift?" I said, "I'm busy right now." He says, "I'm on my time off." I said, "Well, how do you operate this thing? We'll do it without you." Well, at that point, he put the cigarette out, came out, and gave me a ride up and down. But we had one meet just for fun stuff here at the indoor games one year, where the vaulters, January is not their vault time. That's when they're doing their weights and speed work. They're not really touching a pole. So anyway, we had this pole vault, and one year, one vaulter made a height. It was terrible. The crowd sat there and watched people miss and miss and miss and miss. So we thought, we got to do something to change this. So the next year when we had the vault, we told all the vaulters we'd pay them $20 per clearance. Wow, they were jumping at low heights, flying over the bar by 2 feet. The crowd loved it. And these guys coming back to the bench counting the money. That's 20, that's 20, 40, 60, but it made an event. The crowd, they didn't know anything about high heights or anything like that, but they loved the performance, and the vaulters loved it. It was a great experience to have. So, why would you not love something that has that kind of class? It's the circus act. It's the most difficult event of any track event to do. I mean, you need to be one fantastic athlete to do it. And if you look at many of the top decathletes in the world, they started out as pole vaulters because they were such great athletes and switched to becoming a decathlete. It's not for everybody. I had a kid when I was coaching. He came to me. He was a trampoline champion. He won all kinds of trampoline championships, and he wanted to be a pole vaulter. I said, "Oh, okay, that's great." He couldn't run. He couldn't run. And because he couldn't run, he couldn't, get off the ground. And he never, ever became a pole vaulter. He just didn't have the speed. It takes a special person. If we could look for a moment at what people expect at a pole vault event, what does an athlete expect, a vaulter? Well, when they come out, they like everything set up. They like a nice light mood, the officials helping them get their marks and stuff like that. They like to get at least 2 warm-up jumps if they can, a controlled warm-up so nobody gets more than somebody else. Pole vaulters love a win at their back. That's what they want. If we can get the win at their back, they're happy. Crosswinds, headwinds, that's bad news. Rain is bad news too. Really heavy rain is bad news. Lightning, let's forget it, because who wants to stand out there with a carbon pole that conducts electricity? You got to be nuts. I've told pole vaulters a big lie that it'll hit that light standard before it hits them, but I'm not so sure of that. But when it gets really bad, you pretty well have to call it. But pole vaulters like to see, some kind of flag. You're allowed to have 2 wind gauges or wind socks. I shouldn't have wind gauge, wind socks. It's nice to have a second one on high jump, set it up a little higher, where it will throw the wind at the actual when they take off. This new rule they put in about the putting the marks along the side of the runway at the 2.5, 3 meter, 3.5, 4 meter, 4.5, and then it's 5 meter, 6 meter along the side. That's a great rule. That's a great rule for pole vaulters and coaches. It allows them to, see where the takeoff is. Coaches, they want to see where the takeoff occurs. When I coach vaulters, I would say we spent 70% of our time on takeoffs on plant. If you get a good plant, you get a good ride. If you have a lousy plant, you're in trouble. And so that plant's so important. If I can tell secrets for a moment, at the Pan Am Games in Toronto, some of the vaulters came to me. They were from different countries. And you know that procedure we have of putting a cone on the runway and then taking the cone off to let them know the runway's theirs? They asked if we could have put the cone at the 4-meter mark, you know, on the markings on the side. And a lot of them wanted that. And I said, okay, fine. That's the same for all of them. So when we had the cone, we took it off, it was at the 4-meter mark. And that's a very common jump zone. That's their takeoff board. They don't have like a takeoff board for long jump or triple, but that's their takeoff mark. What do coaches want? They want to be able to see that. Okay, so coaches will always be a pain. Probably you've run into a lot of them. I've had run-ins with a lot of coaches. But if you treat them right and you say, okay, you know, give them an angle to see that takeoff spot so they can see it. And when they go to talk to their athlete in the actual coach's box, that's what they want to talk about. Is, you know, you hit the takeoff or you were under or you were over. That's so crucial for pole vaulters to be able to see that. I know there's been some discussion in Canada about, you know, after a vaulter takes a vault, coming out of the pit, taking their pole and putting it in the box. And if you look in the rule book, it shall not count as a fault. I always like to allow that and say to them, okay, but do it quick, do it and get out of there. Don't linger, because if you linger too much, then I'm going to have to warn you. But do it quick. But that's so important for the next vault. There's so much safety involved in the pole vault. It's a very dangerous event. I'm sure you, like I, have seen people hurt in the pole vault. I've seen some pretty bad injuries, sometimes because of the facility and sometimes because of maybe weather conditions, but they can't be prevented. I'd like to talk a little bit, if I could, here about no surprises. Over the years, you never stop learning. I found that in this event. Maybe some of you are like that. I learn all the time. I remember going to Peterborough one time. And I get to the Ontario Games and I'm there the day before. And I go out to see the runway for the pole vault. And I look and there's no vaulting pits or anything on it. And I can't see any vaulting boxes. So I went down to both ends of the runway. Lo and behold, the local groundskeeper had painted them both red to match the runway. And I said, oh, that doesn't look very good. That's not going to work. So I got a hold of him and he came out and he was so proud of his job. I said, well, would you paint them back white so we could see them? And he said, why? So I told him, I said, if you don't paint them white, I'm going to tape them all white so we can see them. So no surprises. In Calgary one time, Doug Kyle was the meet director, and not Doug's fault. He was given the national championships with only maybe a month or two to get ready. And Doug, the pole vault area, it was not up to snuff. The standards were the old standards. They didn't move. They weren't on any basis, and they wouldn't go high enough. So I had 2 tables first under the standards, and we had a scale of 80 centimeters, and we would slide these 2 standards back and forth for the jumpers. And if you've ever been to Calgary, and some of you live there, it was a beautiful day in the morning, lovely day. You needed shorts, t-shirt. That night I needed a parka. A Chinook went through and we just froze our bums. Anyway, remember the pole vault was won actually by Barber. And that's the father of Shaughnessy, George Barber. And it was 1982, and he wanted to try a Canadian record. So here we are with this makeshift thing, trying to measure a Canadian record. Nothing to measure it with. So I saw a doweling on a sign on the side of the fence. So I went over, took the doweling out of the sign. I'm sure the advertiser wouldn't be too happy with me. Shoved it into a pole vault pole, taped it in, got the good old tongue depressor, taped it on at the height that we wanted. And that was a very unofficial way. He didn't make it, so it didn't matter. But no surprises. You just never know what you're going to get. Some of the guys there that were at the Pan Am Games in Toronto in 2015 will remember the nice pole vault standards that wouldn't allow us to get the bar up high enough. We had to use step ladders to actually shove the bar up to get it up high enough. And here we have like a world-class field. of jumpers. So there's so many things that are funny that come along, and you have to sort of go with the rules. Coaches are fun to deal with. Over my career, the coaching rules have changed so many times. It used to be in the old days, they were sitting in the stands. I remember one guy playing games with me one time. He would have a bunch of hats and t-shirts in a bag, and he would move from place to place in the stands and yell at his jumper from different places. And I had an official watching, so where is he now? Over there. Okay, and I wave at him, and they change hats and move somewhere else. But the coaching rules now are so much better. To allow an athlete to go to a coaching box, to see an athlete, to talk to him, is so much better. It can be done quietly rather than all that yelling. So I love the coaching rules we have today, and I find most coaches are pretty good with it. The some of you, I've seen them using them. The depth setting charts that we have, that one of the officials, a call up official, or somebody doing the wind, or not the wind, but they call up or down there at the end of the runway, can flip the chart saying, the depth setting is 45 or 55. That's a wonderful thing to use. It's sort of helped the event become smoother in its running and stuff like that. When I think of from the old days to the new days too, having double runways is really something, to have qualifying rounds with 2 pits going at the same time. Wonderful to be able to handle big groups of athletes. Otherwise, it's one after the other. The wind is something that I'd like to talk about for a moment, because you're probably going to get this from athletes, especially if there's a runway that has a vaulting box at one end and at the other end. And I love the new rule in the rule book that says that wind is no longer a reason for moving the pits. So it used to be in the good old days, I would meet, especially meets that were televised, as a referee, I would meet with the meet director and also CBC or TSN, whoever was televising it, and they would want to know, which way are we going to go? Let's say it's the pole vault or the long jump or triple. Which way are you jumping? And we look at the weather forecast, how are the winds here, what happens in the late afternoon at the time of the event stuff. And at that time, I would have to make a decision. This could be 8 o'clock in the morning. I'd have to make a decision, we're going this way. And once I said we're going this way, you couldn't change it, because they had to set up all their TV cameras and stuff like that. So it would be easy for me to say, all right, let's change it, but the CBC is going to kill you. And you can't really change it. So the athletes pretty well have to put up with it. Sometimes you make the right call, sometimes you make the wrong call. Only once did I ever move a pit during a competition because of wind, and that was in Edmonton. And it's a stadium where the wind swirls. And we got, the vaulters wanted to move it, so fine. The vaulters and myself and the crew, we started moving the pit. We got down the other end and the wind was just as bad. So the vaulters looked and said, well, the same. I said, well, I think we should leave it where it is. That's my call. So we put it back where it was and continued. Because moving the pit during competition takes a lot of time, and it slows down everything here. Interesting when you talk rules, pole vaulters, I've done surveys with them. I've actually sat on the bench with guys like Earl Bell, guys who are Olympian pole vaulters, and I say, have you heard about the new rule? And they'd say, what new rule? And I'd say, well, yeah, the new rule. And I tell them, I never knew that. When did they do that? Oh, about 8 years ago. They don't keep up on the rules. They're vaulters. I had the same thing happen, with the high jump, where Debbie Brill asked me, what are the rules in a tiebreaker? And I said, Debbie, I can't believe you don't know them. She said, I've never been in one. I win outright, which was true. She always did. And Bridget Reed also said, I don't know the rules either. So I gave them a mini clinic to let them know the rules. But a lot of times they don't know. I've asked pole vaulters in modern times, how about the new rule in the pole vault? Well, you can wear gloves. No kidding. What kind of gloves? Oh, it just says gloves. Oh, we're going to try that. We're going to try different kinds of gloves. But they don't know. You know the rules. They don't know the rules. So when they come to you sometimes, remember that. I like to talk, because Jane's here, about ITOs. I've had some interesting experience with ITOs, and I know why they're there because of that meet in Rome where the long jumpers cheated, and gave the Italian long jumper another like 50 centimeters more in his jump and stuff. I have nothing against ITOs. I've worked with them from Cuba, from Puerto Rico, from Austria, and so on. But one interesting experience at the World Championships, the pole vault was going on, and we had to change the timing. So I told my official, set the clock for so-and-so. And the Austrian ITO jumped up and said, "No, you are wrong." And I said, "Set the clock." And anyway, the officials did that. And she gets out a rule book and she comes running up to me and she says, "Look at the rule book," she says. And I looked at it and it's in German. And I said, "Well, I can't read German." And I said, "Well, here, just a sec. Here's my English one." So she looked at them and she compared them and she said, "Oh my God, they did not translate that rule into the German rule book." So you start to wonder about what was going on. And so after that, she said, "Oh, you were right. You go ahead and go with it." So, sometimes I question things. I had a chance to go to a World Symposium and be there with the headphones on and listen to people make the rules for a new rule book coming up. And they always talked about the intention of the rule. What's the intention of the rule? And rules get changed back and forth for whatever reason. Sometimes they're good rule changes. Sometimes I'm not too impressed with them, but they do get changed. But it was an eye-opening experience, believe me, to be there and to see the people that do actually make the rule book. It's so interesting. If I got a few more minutes here, I'll finish this up. About things that happen. The best pole vault I've ever seen as far as run was 2001 Canada Games pole vault in London. I had 11 officials. Wow, what do you do with 11 officials? Most times when we're out there doing our twilights, we got 1, 2 officials. You know how it goes. We got 11. We had an official for everything. Men's bathroom, women's bathroom, and it went tickety-boo like that. And that was a track meet where we had a strange thing happen. A vaulter came down and vaulted, and his at the end there, the rubber thing that goes at the end, it actually came off in the vault, and the plug stayed in the vaulting box, and nobody noticed it. The next pole vaulter came down, and his vaulting pole hit the plug, and the plug came out of there like a bullet. It's a wonder nobody was hurt, because if that had hit you, that would really have hurt. So I always, after that, make a habit of checking the vaulting box to make sure that there's no plug in it.
That's a very good point,
Yeah.
Barclay. Barclay, I wonder if I can just get you to maybe sum up at this point.
Okay.
We give Ina and
Yep.
and Carol just a few moments. Wonderful experiences that you've shared with us, Barclay.
Yeah, just one or two quick things. The weirdest pole vault, 77 Canada Games, you can't take pictures of the wind. The pole vault that day was a decathlon pole vault, the second day of the pole vault. And the winds were so fast, they canceled the water skiing because they couldn't ski. The waves too high, they canceled the sailing because the boats would flip over. And it's a decathlon. Do you do it or not? If you don't do it, you have a day rest, the points don't count. So we did the decathlon in unbelievable winds, and the vaulter would go in the air and the wind would blow them onto the track. We had to have high jump pits covering the track. And Dave Steen won the pole vault. And that was 1977, and 1988, he was a bronze medalist. So wonderful thing. I've asked you in wrapping up here, if you were in my spot, what would you do? I've had athletes do this to me. At one of the Canada Games, we had a runner from Quebec. After he finished his race, he mooned the crowd. Pulled down his shorts. He made a bet with people he'd moon the crowd. So he mooned the crowd and he got DQ'd, and Quebec sent him home. Now the vaulters saw that, and of course, being pole vaulters, they were saying to me, "Now, okay, did you see what happened yesterday about the mooning?" I said, "Yeah, I saw that." And they said, "What are you going to do to us if we moon the crowd?" And I looked at them and I said, "Why don't you try me?" And that's all I said. And they said, you would yellow card us, a red card. I didn't say that. I said, "Why don't you try me?" So sometimes you have to have a little guts to take on people. You never know what's going to happen. But overall, over all the years, It's been wonderful. My only bad thought is I'm so old now. I hope I have a few more years in me.
Barkley, you got lots more years in you, and you've got incredible
I
experiences
don't
to
know.
share with us.
Anyway, thank you for being a very
Appreciate
patient
it.
audience. I hope I didn't bore you.
Not at all. Not at all. Thank you, Barkley. I would, we've published in the agenda, we published an interesting situation for everyone to have a look at and think about how they, as chief, would manage the situation, or how they, as referee, may manage a situation. So I hope that you've taken the opportunity to read Ina's situation. And Ina, I'd call upon you. Oh, here, we have it up on the screen now. So if you just take a moment and read through that. And Ina, if you have, if you would like to make any statements in relation to this, it'd be much appreciated. You will need to unmute, Ina.
If you
Oh, you're there. Hi.
can you hear me now?
Absolutely. Loud and clear. Thanks,
Loud.
Ina.
If you've read this through, you'll understand that I was kind of on a spot, but as I said at the end, I did argue to a point that I could not hold up the meet any longer. But I just wonder what other ones, if you were chiefing that event, would have handled it, or what do you think about this situation? Now, Bob,
Anyone would like to make a comment, they'll have to unmute themselves first. Okay.
Okay, this is Bing Chu talking. I read this completely over several times, and I agree with Ina's decision at all, because once the increment's been set during the technical meeting the night before the meet, they cannot be changed. Even the competition director have no right to change the increments.
I agree.
So that's my comment.
Were the heights published to go 165, 170, 175? Or
Yes.
did they say that there was going to be, when X number of athletes were remaining, they would go up by 2s or 3s?
No, it was set, all the increments would be 5 until the final jumper, and they could have set what they wanted after they had won the event.
That's another point in that thing too. She was not ahead when that,
That's
occurred.
correct. Yes, she was not. And that was pointed out to the director.
Hi, this is Swen speaking. Can you hear me?
Yes,
Absolutely,
Uh,
Swen.
I agree with your decision. In my opinion, technically, she hasn't won the event yet. They're tied at 155. If Sylvia jumps the 160 and the other girl passes, just because you can't change the increment, she still has to try the 160 just like everybody else did.
well, she passed 160, so therefore.
Right,
she
but then you
had to
can't,
try
she's still
165.
only tied. She's
Yes,
still only tied. And generally, if we have a tie, sometimes we, in other competitions, we will ask the athletes, do you want to go up by 5 or by 3 or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, and actually she was in second place at the time.
that's correct.
But technically, they're still jumping.
Yeah,
Yes.
well, one of them was still jumping, but she had agreed to pass 160 and agreed to go to 165. By passing, she agrees to go to the next published height.
Yes, I agree with that, John. Yeah.
I do have a question though. Is the competition director have the right to talk to the athlete?
I don't know. I didn't think the competition director had any say in the judging of an event. That is not their job as far as I knew, but we didn't get to that I told the director. Though
That's my understanding too.
I really wonder if he did realize the error of his ways, because we had a reception either that day or the next day, I can't remember. And he came and asked me if he could buy me a drink. So I don't know. He didn't offer to too many other people. So I just kind of wonder, but it was, I was in a position at the time.
I
have a-
think, oh, go ahead,
Can I
George.
speak?
Yep,
I have a
absolutely.
different point of view on this. I can sort of see Alan Bell's position. He was party to setting the increments in the first place. And he may have decided that they made a mistake in sustaining the 5 centimeter increments to a much higher height than they should have. Because what you've asked this athlete to do now is to be essentially disadvantaged by taking an increment which is too large for them. Even though they've earned the right to continue the competition. And I feel that the competition director was correct in changing his mind and reducing the size of the increments. And what he's doing there is within the rules, right? There's no rule which says you must sustain 5 centimeter increments to any particular point. Right?
Was
In fact,
Alan
you
the
see a lot
technical,
of preset increments where they will take 5s up to a given level, which I think is sufficient, and then change to 3s and then 2s for the rest of the competition, based on what their judgment was of where the athletes would be and how many athletes would be left at that point. So I think that there is nothing which in the rule book which requires you to use 5 centimeter increments, only what has been preset by the competition director or technical delegate. And I think the technical delegate has the right to change his mind if he thinks they made a mistake. And
Here's my
the
here's my
athlete
question.
is being disadvantaged here by being required to jump a 5 centimeter increment where she's nearing the limits of her ability and could very reasonably ask for a 2 centimeter increment. And we are, by requiring the 5 centimeter, disadvantaging that athlete. So
Well, I
I think we
don't
have to look
agree.
at it from that athlete's point of view.
Here's my
Now,
question.
An athlete can have, even if they have not won the competition, can have a 2 centimeter increment. It just may not be less than 2 centimeters.
My question is this: is it fair in the sense that the
Sorry. All right, I said-
Sylvia jumped at 155? Were they told that the next height would be 160 and then 162, or
No,
and
no.
did Cindy know that she was passing 160 and the next height would be 165?
They were all aware that they were going up 5 centimeters until there was one left. And we ran every other jump at the World Masters with that same thing. We didn't.
Because
run
if
it-
Sylvia had known that after 155, it'd be 160 and 162, she might have therefore said, oh, I'm going to pass as well then. And
That's
save
right.
her energy for 162. You've got to give both of them, in my opinion, the same choice. And you gave one, she passed 160, that's fine. But now she says, well, maybe 162. Well, maybe Sylvia might have said, let me pass and I'll go 162 as well.
In my opinion,
Go ahead, Bernard.
yeah, it is Bernard Dubois speaking. I think
That's
I don't
possible.
think it is
Hello?
right to jump 162 because he should have jumped 160 first. After 160, you can make any bargain with you, but he should have jumped the 160. He didn't jump the 160, so it's not right for me.
So, Ayana,
Go ahead.
it's Pritam over here. So you were as a chief, right? So your call was okay at that time. It was to refer to your referee, and the referee said it was okay. So for me, okay, that's good. Unfortunately, that was not the proper way of putting up the increment. But as a chief, you the direct person you're reporting to is the chief referee, and the referee say, okay, that it was injured and stuff like, and he agreed on that, so you go on that. That's good. For me, that's going to be my call.
Thank you. Well, this has been a very stimulating conversation, and I appreciate everyone's input. So I'd be prepared to take one more. Oh, we're moving on. So thank you very much. And now, Carol, if I can get Carol Cull has forwarded 5 very, very interesting technical questions for us, and much appreciated, Carol. If there is, Carol, if you'd like to open it up for discussion.
Well, I think this question
It's the same.
is actually very similar to the one that Ina had. So perhaps we won't dwell on that because we'll get the same sorts of responses. And maybe we'll go to question number 2 instead.
Oh, there we go.
And so I'll leave you to read. You don't need me reading for you. And just curious, what would you do? Which board would you choose? And why would you choose it? Or which runway? I don't think there's a right answer here.
Take the runway with the 9 and the 13 and tape in an
yes.
11 and too bad. By the way, it's John Caulfield talking.
Can I ask a question of this here? What level of track meet are we talking? Is this an all-comers meet, or is this a Canadian championship? Are we talking,
Well, I don't think anybody in an all-comers meet, or not many of them, are going to use a 13-meter board. So I'm guessing that this is more, maybe even a Canadian championship. Certainly, it could be a provincial championship. Or maybe even a high school with a couple of very competent jumpers.
Yes, the athletes in a Canadian championship would be more uniform in their abilities, I think, than this. So you wouldn't have probably a 9-meter board being requested. You might have an 11-meter and a 13-meter board. But I could be wrong about that.
personally, when I look at this, I love the situation to have the 2 runways. It just means more work for officials to go from one to the other, but you don't have to move any boards. You just have to move from one to the other. I love it because you got one wind gauge would serve both pits. And I think it's better for the athletes. It's certainly safer for the athletes. I love it, but I wouldn't want to do it at an Olympic Games.
No.
High level meet, but at a lot of meets, I think it'd be, kind of a fun thing.
Well, I would hope that at an Olympic game, you're not having a 9-meter jumper, but
No.
anyway.
No, but you can do what Barclay is suggesting by moving the sidelines.
That's right.
Well,
Yeah. I've done that.
Speaking, I have to consider all the athletes in this competition. Okay, by choosing the 9-meter and the 13-meter boards, this is what I think that I should do, because if I choose the 13-meter board, wait a minute, the 11 and the 13, I don't consider the 9 meters one. But the 11 meters still can jump from the 9, but there is nothing for the 9 meters board if we choose the other one way.
11-meter jumper cannot jump from the 9.
Well, presumably you could tape an 11-meter board. You wouldn't actually have a board, but you could have a taped 11-meter.
Well, you
Space.
could have a board in the 13 and a board in the 11. if
Can we
you're
jump in
switching
here?
runways.
We have a question from Janet.
Yes, I have run into this situation before. And it was more or less when you were talking about having to tape down a board. That happened in Toronto at one of the big meets a couple of 3 or 4 years ago now. However, in this situation, I would have both pits prepared, have white tape down the center, to separate the two pits. And I would just move my officials over to the 11-meter board, because if everything's prepared ahead of time, and you've got good officials, and it doesn't take any longer. You're just walking over to the other pit, and the athletes know ahead of time what's going on when they're called. And we just do it. It wasn't a big deal.
And I think that's what Barkley was referring to, is to have the two pits available and just have the 11-meter people run off the 11-meter board, have the others run off the other board, and run it in the order in which they're on the sheet. And just move your officials over when it becomes time for an 11-meter jumper.
Okay,
I've got a question as a tech manager. Double wide, does it mean that is exactly twice as wide and the two runways are side by side? At which point you actually need to have two white tapes and they have to be moved? Or is it like the setup at the Toronto Track and Field Center indoors, where there were actually 3 runways, and you could have a right and a left runway, in the middle runway, you could put the tape down the center of it?
Well, we
If
do
that's
that in
the-
case you were coaching.
Yeah.
I would
If
like,
that's
I'd
the-
like us to move on to question 3. Carol, these are very stimulating.
They happen.
Question 3, if you'd like to take a read of that, and we'll open the floor.
Oh, yeah, this is when the athlete runs outside the white line. You said
an
this
easy
is
one.
allowed.
This one's
No
easy.
action. Yeah.
Yeah, I
no,
hope
not
so.
hard. Well,
They don't have to stay between the lines.
no,
That's right.
I don't know, yeah.
you can run outside and, yeah.
You
Yes,
can win
they
from
do.
left field if you want.
You could.
I was right wing myself.
Somebody coming in from left field, but
Okay, if we can move on to question 4.
Well, the runway?
No.
Old rule or new rule?
Touching.
Yes, yeah.
Oh, it has to be the new rules.
Area close
Everything is the new rule.
Yep.
And the mark made in the sand, it's a fault. Actually create a fault, it's a fault.
Yes.
You looked that up in the rule?
Yeah, we were,
No, there's
Check
no
new-
fault.
Check new rule.
New rule says first step by foot,
First touch by foot.
first touch by foot inside of the pit, and she did not. It was just her hands. But it happens.
That's right.
so,
That's right.
Rules are hard.
It would be different if it was in the course of landing that she touched the outside. In other words, propping herself up in the course of landing. But in fact, she'd already landed. So she's
Yep.
standing up after landing, and then it's her first touch outside the outside the pit that's at issue. And that's not an exit. So
Okay, and if we could move on to number 5.
it's not a fault.
oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. No, this is the one that we said.
3.5 meters wide. That's wrong.
Yes.
It's too wide, so you take both
Oh,
sides.
oh,
3 meters.
This
One
is-
184.
Yeah, so how many centimeters you take off each?
So we said
24, no, 20.
20, it was 25, and then if the tape is 5 centimeters wide, then we said 20 meters, 20 centimeters
Yeah.
becomes the amount to decrease the width.
can't hear it.
Can't hear you.
Oh,
You
Were
have a
you
lovely
talking-
voice,
were you
but I
listening
can't
to
hear
me?
you.
okay, no, it's okay, because I was just talking to Tim. But I'll tell you, I
Oh.
did, no, I looked this up and we talked about this. Because the maximum landing width in the pit is 3 meters,
That's right.
which is 184, rule 184, the new, or the old, that's the old rule was 184, TR 29. We would reduce the landing area by 25 centimeters on each side
Right.
of the pit. And then we use the white tape, which is 5 centimeters wide. So you'd have to then take away those 5 centimeters, so 20 centimeters becomes the amount to decrease the width on each side. The tape would be out of bounds, and you'd have to explain this to the athletes in their briefing so they would understand what the pit width really is, and also make sure your officials know that this is the new, you know, if we're gonna have,
Yeah, she's saying that.
how's that?
Well, the tape is,
Carol, any, do you have a reaction to, or comment to Janet's input?
Well, the only thing is you have to make sure that it isn't a para event, in which
Yes.
case the 3.5 is the pit width.
Exactly,
It said under 18 men.
yeah.
Right. Well, it doesn't say, it does say under 18, but it
Yeah.
didn't say para.
No.
But you're absolutely right, Janet. That's exactly what you would have to do.
Yeah,
Now-
I passed. I passed.
We
It's
stayed
been
up
a-
until 3 o'clock trying to
No,
figure that one out.
No, we didn't. But we had to
Okay.
think about it, you know.
Good.
Okay,
For a while.
Yes. Carol, I would like to sincerely express my appreciation for the work you put into this. And you've given us some very interesting, stimulating jumps situations to discuss as a group, and that's just tremendous. Let me share with you that we are open to receive input such as this from anyone. If you have an experience that, especially people that are in refereeing situations, there must be, most referees have a fascinating, interesting situation that they've had to deal with at some time. So if you have one, we'd really appreciate it if you could submit that to us and that we had enter it into the program and notify you at the appropriate time.
Barkley hogged them all.
I'm sorry?
Say Barkley hogged them all.
Yeah, Barkley's been around for a while doing pole vault. So, you know, just before we go here, and
Oh,
I'm
it's
very-
been around for a while.
just before we leave, Jane Edstrom. Jane, you were at the Olympics. I looked for you. So tell us where you're at and what you did.
Maybe she's gone.
Are you there?
Nope, nope, she's here. I was just unmuting myself. The reason you didn't see me, well, it would be a catastrophic event if you saw me because I was secretary to the jury. So all my work was done behind the scenes. When any athlete did a formal appeal, I was in on the oral protest as well, but when there was a formal appeal, then I had to gather all the information, get all the personnel gathered, video clips that the jury might want to refer to for the appeal. So that's why you didn't see me on the field.
Jane, can I ask you a question?
Sure.
On the men's high jump, was there any deal made before the event by the technical delegate and the referee about if it's a tie, it can remain a tie?
No.
It has to be done before the event. I was really shocked when I saw them shake hands, and I watched it several times, and they talked to, I would say, the call-up man. There was no armband on the official they talked to signify a chief or a referee, and they were allowed to shake hands. I feel that there should have been a jump off because the rules are there for a jump off. I know this has happened in previous meets where they shake hands, but those are not the Olympic Games where you're trying to declare an Olympic champion. Those are meets where we get together with 5 or 6 people and agree if it's tied, we take two gold medals. But do you know any background on that? Why that was allowed to happen? Why was there no jump off?
Well, because the technical delegates didn't decide it ahead of time.
They should
Then
have.
it is up to the athletes whether they want to jump off or whether they want to leave it as a tie. And if it was the World Championships, they would not have left it as a tie because they share the winning money. In the Olympic Games, there's a gold medal at stake, but there is no money involved. And it was the ITO referee who they spoke to It wasn't just the call-up person.
Yeah, personally, I disagree with the call because they robbed the fans of one of the most exciting things, and that is a jump off. I always find it really exciting to watch. I don't know if you noticed, but that very night later in the long jump, in the men's long jump, 2 men jumped 8 meters 41 and were tied for first place. And they used the tie-breaking rule to declare gold and silver. And yet the 2 high jumpers were allowed to shake
They
hands
didn't have a,
because they're friends, even though in different countries, and both take
But
gold.
Barclay, that's what the rules dictate in horizontal
Yeah, I know.
events, whether it be a throw or a jump.
True.
That there is a tie-breaking format, and there's a tie-breaking format in verticals as well. It just so happened those 2 gentlemen had the same scorecard.
Yeah, I would have loved to have seen the jump off to see who would have won.
Well, you might have, but those 2 young men, I tell you, it was a
I
great
know one
event.
I know one was hurting, but that's part of the event as well, to not be hurting. But I would have loved to see the jump off. I know there was no jump off in the pole vault because the Duplantis won it going away. But anyway, just my point of view.
Excellent. Well, listen, thank you, everyone. Much appreciate everyone staying with us for the period of time here tonight. Just a reminder that our second gathering will be January the 19th. And Norma Morgan from Edmonton will do a presentation on horizontal jumps. We've already had a submission of a situation for discussion presented to us. And if anyone has, say, technical situations that they would like to submit, I very much look forward to that. We'll put them in a format for you. So thank you very much. That concludes this evening, and best wishes to all.